I originally applied end of August last year. After a medical assessment that was over the phone. I got scored 0 across the board in every single category, which was a shock, to be honest. And I remember being in quite a bad place when that letter came through. When it comes to the scoring system itself, I don't think it's built for people with mental illness. There could be times where I would go 5 days without eating because I have bipolar, and I put that in there and got scored 0 on that category. It's awful. You're forced to relive trauma, you're forced to relive a lot of parts of your life that you would prefer to hold close to your chest, and you have to repeat it over and over again on paper, on the phone. No disability group has backed it. Everyone, not a single one has. Lives will be lost because of this.
How would you like to introduce yourself and your work?
Well, I'm Wiggy. I only recently just joined Mad Youth Organise. I got to join after I got invited to a drop-in session with MPs at the House of Commons, which was really interesting. But I am a leader of Mad Youth Organise now.
Awesome.
And what Mad Youth Organise is a group of young people who have lived experience with mental illness. And they campaign against the corporations and economic policy that is making us sick in the first place. So recently our campaign has been heavily directed towards the social security cuts, the PIP cuts. So that's what a lot of our movements have been about in the last few months.
So as I understand it, you were involved in a particular instance of direct action just over a week ago with a particular business secretary.
Jonathan Reynolds.
Could you elaborate on that a little bit?
So we disrupted a Labour fundraiser where Jonathan Reynolds was the main speaker. Me and another person from Mad Youth Organise.
This is Hannah.
Hannah, we went into this fundraiser and we waited quite a while for Jonathan Reynolds to show up, and it was quite nerve-wracking.
I was going to say, it must be quite an experience to sort of be.
It was really fascinating, actually, because the fundraiser itself was, well, obviously it's about raising money for the next Labour campaign, but they were doing a raffle that was £20 a ticket. That was raffling off different whiskies and a bottle of champagne signed by Keir Starmer, which was...
That's quite a symbol right there, isn't it? A bottle of champagne signed by Keir Starmer.
Especially when you're sort of sat there ready to disrupt something based on, cuts to disabled people's like social security.
Of course,
And then they're raffling champagne signed by Keir Starmer. So there was that. The irony there was...
uncouth.
A little bit. He was supposed to talk at 6 or 6:30, but he didn't get there till 8:30, so we were sat for quite a while. But yes, we disrupted and very quickly got swarmed by different MPs, and it was overwhelming. There was a lot of there's a time and place for this, and just pushing and shoving, which time and place, I don't know when the time and place would be. That felt like the time and place, but it was intense, definitely.
So there's quite a few scalps on the direct action. I think you guys have. Who else have you got? You've got West Streeting. Have you got West Streeting?
Yes, we've done a lot of disrupting any sort of high profile government ministers. I wasn't there for the West Streeting one, but that was incredibly powerful. That was Ellie and Hannah. But there was the West Streeting was disrupted. There's been a few others in like different constituencies as well, but there's been a lot.
Fair enough.
I think that's been the most effective protest, to be honest, because it's garnered media attention, and because it's face to face, direct confrontation with the people who are pushing for the bill.
Of course, I mean, there's a reason you get to a point where direct action is necessary. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So obviously, without revealing anything that you're not comfortable revealing, I was wondering if you could give sort of us more of a sense of what it is like to be claiming PIP, sort of how the system works and barriers.
I'm currently in the middle of the process. I originally applied end of August last year, and after a medical assessment that was over the phone, I got scored 0 across the board in every single category, which was a shock, to be honest. And I remember being in quite a bad place when that letter came through, and it actually caused within itself a massive mental health crisis for me. So and the way the letter was written was incredibly tactless as well. It was a lot of because you work part-time, you can't be telling the truth about these aspects of your life and things like that, and especially because my job security had sort of been on the line at the time because of how much time I was taking off for my mental health issues. It was not really the right thing to read in that moment. And so when I applied for my mandatory reconsideration, I made that really clear to the person on the phone I was applying with, that, the last letter had caused a huge crisis and that this entire process had been really harrowing, because it's really long. It's awful. You're forced to relive trauma. You're forced to relive a lot of parts of your life that you would prefer to hold close to your chest, and you have to repeat it over and over again on paper, on the phone, and that's really, really difficult. And when it comes to the scoring system itself, I don't think it's built for people with mental illness, because I got the impression that, say for example, the eating and drinking aspect of it, when I put that part in of how that affects my life in the application, I said that there could be times where I would go 5 days without eating because I have bipolar, and there would be occasions where I either wouldn't feel up to it, wouldn't feel like I deserved it, and I put that in there and got scored 0 on that category, which seems ridiculous, because if you're going 5 days without food because you're physically incapable of feeding yourself, of looking after yourself, you would think that would score higher than a 0. But it seemed like there was this impression that because I could physically get up and eat, that it didn't count, even though that's not really how mental illness works. So it didn't really feel fair in the first place. And then I did my mandatory reconsideration and made all of that really clear and got scored 0 across the board again. Applied for my tribunal pretty much immediately, and we're July now, and I have not got a date for my tribunal. Really? I recently received a letter saying it could take months. The DWP itself waited till the very last minute to respond to the tribunal services. I actually don't know what that's called. But I think I got a letter from the tribunal services that said that they tried to reach out to the DWP,
and they got no response. So we're waiting for, basically giving them a few more weeks to respond before taking direct action. But I have no idea when my tribunal will be. And considering I applied end of August, we're looking at nearly a year just to get access to PIP. So I think when there's this assumption that PIP is easy to claim and that, PIP is consistently abused. That kind of scrounging.
It doesn't make sense to me because of how difficult it's been for me to access it.
Of course, And obviously there are, hundreds of thousands of people up and down the country probably with the same experience.
Exactly. I mean, in Mad Youth Organised, there's a lot of PIP claimants, but there's also a lot of people who, like me, are in the middle of the process. There are also people in that campaign who have applied multiple times and been rejected multiple times. So I think, if you need that help, which I do, and you've already put so much time into trying to get that help, I think that alone is sort of evidence that you need that help. And what I'm really concerned about is, although I've clearly suffered with symptoms of bipolar for a very long time, I didn't actually get my diagnosis until this year. So although when I filled in the application, I was directly talking about how those symptoms affected my life, because the diagnosis didn't come till afterwards, I'm now really concerned I'm going to show up to a tribunal and they're going to say, well, actually, you have to start over, because usually that's the case when you get a diagnosis after the initial claim.
Yeah.
So, that's a really terrifying thought to me, because I don't know if I could drag myself through it all again.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
But yeah, we will see, I suppose.
Moving on to the actual bill, which, of course, passed yesterday in its second reading. It's got pretty daunting impact assessment. So even with the significant amendments that they've added to the bill, it's still going to push 150,000 disabled people into poverty.
Yeah.
Let's just keep it simple. What's your assessment of the situation, and what is going to lead to?
It was all very chaotic yesterday, because there was a very long debate in Parliament, and then about half an hour before the bill was supposed to be voted on, there was another concession which pulled clause 5 from it completely, but that was verbal and it wasn't written down. So, it feels like a win for the disabled community because there's been a climb down. At the same time, it's something we're very skeptical about, because it hasn't guaranteed that it won't still happen, even with, it's like you said, even with the concessions that current PIP claimants won't have this new eligibility criteria introduced. It's sort of pushed this issue further down the line, because now they're talking about reintroducing this conversation in autumn 2026 after the Tims review.
Yeah, of course.
Which makes us very nervous, because there is the possibility that through the Tims review, they will push the bill through in an even more undemocratic way. But also it leaves us a little bit skeptical, because they've said that they would co-produce this bill, this review, with disability groups now, which they should have done to start with, to be honest.
Also, the pace that the bill's been pushed through Parliament
exactly,
is astronomical.
And no disability group has backed it. Everyone, not a single one has. So, it's very clear what the disabled community needs and what they think of the changes to the eligibility criteria. But I mean, the government's promised to co-produce reviews and bills with communities before, and then hasn't actually done so. And there's also been, a history of producing reviews, but using biased sources and, experts who don't necessarily have the best interests of the disabled community in mind. Although it is a win, and I'm so proud and in awe of all of the action that disabled groups have done over the last few months. There has been real mobilization, and we have, backed the government into a corner, and they have had to force this further down the road. It's not finished. And until we can get a guarantee that there won't be a two-tier system, that this bill won't pass further down the line, then we won't stop fighting. And it's also probably important to mention that although clause 5 was removed, the cuts to the health element of universal credit still went through. Which, practically halves the amount that someone who would be on that element receives a week. So it's still causing massive cuts. It's still leading to massive cuts, and it's still going to push so many people to the brink, I think. And I don't think there seems to be this understanding that lives will be lost because of this. It's not, it's a lifeline. It's not just, it's been compared by, ministers as pocket change, but it's not pocket change. It's what people need to live. And I don't think there's been that understanding.
So
where do you think this fixation with the welfare system is coming from? Why do you think they are seeking to quote unquote balance the books off the backs of disabled people? And
I mean, it's not new, as you said, like 14 years of austerity. This isn't the first time that disabled people have been used as scapegoats. I do think, in particular, with the new eligibility criteria that they want to put into place, it does target a lot of people with invisible disabilities, mental health issues, that kind of thing.
Of course.
And I think it's easy for the government to paint this picture of those people as people who aren't in need of that money. From the last few months of campaigning, it's sort of been made clear to us that the public don't agree with this. It seems very much like it's coming from the top rather than from
top down.
Rather than the people who are going to be affected by it, because this affects everyone. I think everyone knows someone who is in need of welfare benefits, whether it's a friend, whether it's a family member. And even if they don't, there is no telling when someone is going to need that down the line. And, anyone could become ill, anyone could become disabled at any moment.
Yeah.
And I think it's important that there is that security there, that people know that there's that security there, even if it doesn't directly affect them right now.
Yeah.
Not to divert, but
please.
As a member of the trans community, that in particular as well was really shocking.
Yeah.
Because that felt very conservative. That didn't feel, it didn't feel Labour at all.
Yeah.
As shown by the fact that there have been many Labour MPs who have stood up and said, this is not what I signed up for when I joined Labour. This is not, it wasn't part of the Labour manifesto, for example, these cuts to welfare.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of MPs have stood up and said that this is not what the Labour Party stands for. The Labour Party is supposed to be for the working class. It's supposed to be...
built the welfare state.
Yeah, exactly. So it is a very conservative move of them, but it's also not their first conservative move. And it's been a wild ride, honestly. As someone who, years and years ago did vote Labour and now wouldn't feel comfortable doing so, it has been a drastic turn.
Yeah, it's been a weird one. I mean, I will say, watching the debates yesterday, there were some very moving appeals from MPs in Parliament, which is, that is a good sign, obviously. I mean, even the fact that this has been such a crisis for Keir Starmer. I mean, that's a good sign. There are still MPs in Parliament within the Labour Party that are, voting with their conscience, guided by their principles. That's great. This isn't actually a question that I've written down, but this is something I'd like to ask, I think. Did you find any solace in the fact that this has been such a sort of mutinous period for Keir Starmer in terms of the welfare bill? I
did find solace in that, because it gives you faith in humanity a little bit. And I've been involved in a lot of activism over the last few years, and a lot of activism has felt really hopeless because it feels like you're shouting into the void. It feels like no one's really listening to you.
Yeah.
But when I joined Mad Youth Organise, and the first sort of protest in a way that I did with them was a very much sit down with MPs to give them personal testimonials. I mean, even from that point, I think that would have been end of April. Even from that point, I sort of had a little bit more faith that this was not going to be easy for Keir Starmer to push through.
Yeah.
Because just a lot of MPs disagreed with it. And in fact, I spoke to a lot of MPs that day, so I don't remember their names, but I did actually see a lot of them stand up in the debate yesterday and stick by what they said they would do at the drop-in session that we did. So it does give me hope. And also being part of this group and being part of this
amazing movement has given me hope as well, because we may be one of the most vulnerable communities in the UK, but we are strong. We have people power. We aren't just going to lay down and take it. And the fact that we've been able to force this climb down alone is testament to the influence that we've had just in a matter of months. So yeah, it does give me hope that it has been a mutinous time in the Labour Party, because it means that although this has been pushed to autumn 2026, that doesn't necessarily mean that it will pass that time. You know, it means, I think it shows that if we can do that in a matter of months, then in over a year we can have even greater impact.
Yeah, I mean, the fight's not over.
Yeah,
which is
the fight's not over. So
so as we spoke about before, even pre the bill, the welfare system is pretty broken.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's obvious. A lot of people have had terrible situations and experiences with the welfare system as it stands. Are there any particular policies and adjustments you would like to see made to the welfare system?
If I can focus on like PIP for a second, as we were talking about earlier, it's really not tailored to people with invisible disabilities, people with mental health issues, because it doesn't take into account the fact that a condition might fluctuate, the fact that a condition might not be immediately obvious to the eye. I would like to see the PIP assessments become a bit more compassionate, because they are very difficult to get through. Honestly, the fact that everything is really slow as well is really, really difficult. I mean, if claiming PIP takes a year to do, what are you doing in the meantime?
Yeah.
You know,
I mean, if you need that support now.
Exactly. I mean, I think there was a statistic from Scope that disabled households on average spend over 1,000 more a month than typical households. And, you know, where are you getting that money from?
Yeah.
And
I mean, you can't be waiting a year for that.
Exactly. I mean, I've definitely felt the strain having to wait for it. I've had to rely on food banks. I've been living very much paycheck to paycheck.
Yeah.
Because I can't work full time at the moment. And part of my hope is that if I did have PIP, that would give me the access to work full time, because I would be able to put things in place to help me.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'd like to see that entire... I mean, it's obvious that process needs reform. This is the wrong reform. It's obvious that it needs reform, because it is currently a mess. It takes too long, and it doesn't... There's a lot of errors where people will lose PIP for no apparent reason, and then it takes so long to get it back, and people rely on that money to live. But I mean, the welfare system entirely it hasn't taken into account the current cost of living at all.
Yeah.
As part of my job, actually, I help other people claim universal credit, claim housing benefit.
That's great.
As part of the work that I do.
Yeah.
And I can see from that perspective as well that it really doesn't work, that a lot of people are left sort of scrambling, and that's a massive issue. But finding this extra money on the backs of disabled people is not acceptable when, you know, you could tax the super rich.
I was hoping you were going to say
yeah.
I was literally about to drop that.
Yeah, so
nice little 2%.
The 2% tax on anyone with 10 million in assets could cover the money that they need 5 times over.
I think the exact figure was from the email that I was sent. It was 6.1 billion.
Yeah,
they could recover from 2% annual.
No, I think it was even more than that.
Was it?
Yeah, potentially.
Ooh.
I think it was even more than that. But it's, you know, that's money that's easily gained without loss of life.
Yeah,
you know, and it's just, it infuriates me that the choice was made to harm the most vulnerable rather than
people who wouldn't necessarily even miss that money.
Yeah, I mean, it's more of the status quo, really, isn't it? It's, you know, pensioners with the winter fuel payments and disabled people with the welfare cuts.
Yeah, which was then doubled back on with the winter fuel payments.
Yeah.
And, you know, as the majority, where I work, because I work for a housing charity, the majority of our beneficiaries are pensioners, and they felt that.
Yeah.
And as a charity, we actually had to move in and you know, use our funds to make that up. So, you know, if these cuts go through, that's another thing to take into account.
Yeah.
Yes, it might earn you back 5 billion, but there are things down the line that will put even more strain on the economy, even more strain on the NHS. Like charity groups are going to have to move in and do the work instead.
Of course, yeah.
And that doesn't help anyone, and it doesn't do anything for the economy, especially because PIP is an in-work benefit.
Yeah.
So people will lose their jobs and they won't be contributing to the economy anymore.
Yeah.
So, you know, it doesn't, if the government, you know, sat and spent just 5 minutes thinking about the logistics, about the long-term effects this would have, it would be completely obvious to them that this won't even save the money in the long run. It's the wrong move.
Yeah.
But I think because they haven't consulted with disabled groups, that's not crossed their minds.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.